Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, November 30th, 2022 City Council Finance Committee meeting. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. Seeing none. At this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. Public forum. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak on any item on the agenda may do so for no more than 2 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record and the agenda item that you are speaking. Anybody wishing to speak? Seeing none, we will begin. This evening we have committee members present, Councilors Boschman, Van Hazinga, Di Natale, and Cruz. President Zarella indicated that he will be running a little bit late. He's stuck in traffic, so we'll proceed without him in the meantime. First item on the agenda is 27022. An order that there being hereby is transferred from within the sum of $100,000 from reserve for other municipal purposes, capital expenses, and credited to cemetery capital expenses, mausoleum repairs, for the purpose of hiring a qualified practitioner to provide plans, specifications, cost estimates, renderings, and other items necessary for the restoration and refurbishment of the mausoleum at Forest Hill Cemetery. DPW Commissioner Erickson and Cemetery Board of Trustees Chair Judy Perla.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Mayor Di Natale for the opportunity to be before you tonight asking you for this appropriation. We've prepared a short slideshow just to kind of give you some background on exactly what we're asking for this money for. So with that, I'll share my screen and we'll get right into it. So what we're asking for tonight is an appropriation of $100,000 from available funds in order to begin the design process for repairs to the mausoleum at Forest Hill Cemetery. It's called the Forest Hill Abbey. It was constructed in the early 1900s, and that's the image that you see up on the screen right now. So this is the mausoleum. So this is an interior shot of the mausoleum. Structure was built by the Security Mausoleum Company of Massachusetts, starting in 1918 and finally dedicated on October 31st, 1920. At the dedication, there were a few notable people listed up there on the slide, including members from the Boston Symphony Orchestra. So back in the 20s, it was a big deal. This slide shows a cross-section of the mausoleum itself and the air venting required to keep the folks entombed there in a reasonable state. This slide just goes into some background on the building itself. It was an architectural milestone that was set back when this was built. It was the first of these mausoleums constructed in New England. And this photo is just another shot of the interior. Again, another shot of the interior. So there's 480 crypts here, 18 private rooms. It's not at full capacity right now, so there is space available for future entombment of individuals here. So that's something to keep in mind. So this photo I thought was interesting. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, the woman who's buried here was 106 years old when she was entombed in the mausoleum. That's pretty impressive. So there's approximately 380 people buried in the mausoleum right now, and as I mentioned, there's still space for more. So these people paid money to be buried here, so it's the responsibility of the city, the Board of Cemetery Trustees, and the DPW to make sure that this building is cared for. And unfortunately, over the years, it's fallen into a state of disrepair. We'll get into that in the next few slides. So this is a shot of the exterior. You can see along the roof line that there's a significant amount of water damage, damage to the roof, damage to the facade, damage to the windows. Another shot of some of the staining along the building from some of the water damage that's occurred. Some of the drains on the roof were plugged over the years, and no one was maintaining them, so it caused additional damage. Since then, we've started maintaining these roof drains, and it's fixed some of the water issues that we've experienced, but not all of them. Frankly, a lot of the damage has already been done due to the neglect over the years. Another shot of the exterior. The rear of the building, the ground actually slopes toward the building instead of away, so that's caused some issues with the foundation right where it meets the toe slope there. So part of what we'd like to do with this building, in addition to the building restoration itself, is do some minor site work to make sure that this problem is solved. Again, another shot of some of the exterior decay, showing some crumbling concrete and some of the water damage at the joint between the stairway and the building itself. This is a shot of some of the interior issues that have cropped up due to the water damage. So there's some stained glass windows that you can see in this picture, and there's mold and drywall rot that's kind of started to occur around the windows. A couple of shots of the roof. Again, water damage through some of these roof penetrations has caused issues. You can see there. So our goal as DPW is to restore this building ultimately. It's going to cost money to do so. So what we're looking for right now is an appropriation from available funds to get the process started. So the process outlined on the slide starts with creating an RFQ and hiring an owner's project manager, or an OPM. OPM would work to hire an architect. The architect would put together a design package and a cost estimate just based on our preliminary estimates. You see the range up there on the screen. Once that design package has been created, we would bid the project out for construction, pending available funds to do so, and then we perform a public bid in accordance with Chapter 149 of the Massachusetts General Laws. So, like I mentioned, I've got Ms. Judy Perla here with us tonight. She's the chair of the Board of Cemetery Trustees. Judy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I just want to say thank you for allowing us to at least give you the presentation that we did tonight. As Commissioner Erickson has said, over the years, this building has had a lot of neglect. You can see that by the slides, and we have been trying to Band-Aid it since 1972. With the roof particularly, which has been causing us a lot of damage into the interior of the building. And it really needs to get something done. We realize that the city has other projects that need to take precedence before this, but this is over 100 years old, and no one has done anything to this building other than just Band-Aid it. We cannot change the people who are buried there. In order to take them out of that particular location and entomb them somewhere else would cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Plus, we would need permission from family members, which would be impossible to do. So this is a city building. It's in a public burial ground, and we're begging and pleading with you, please, to allow us to at least appropriate this money so that we can get some kind of an idea from these individuals that know what they're doing about restoration and repair and whatever, to at least give us that time to go ahead and do this work. And then we'll get to the core of building, renovating it, whatever needs to be done. It is a lot of money, I understand that. But right now, because of COVID, we only have 134 actual burial sites on our grounds. We've just maintained one area of the cemetery that you saw the construction work of, which will allow us another 700 possibly in-ground burials. But this particular mausoleum was the first of its kind, and there was a trust fund set up for it, for perpetual care. The money, we have no idea what happened to it. It hasn't been researched, but according to the auditor, there's like $3,000 in that account over 100 years. That's not right. So there are notable people buried there, and then there are just plain old folks buried there. So, again, we're just asking that you consider this proposal and this $100,000 to at least get us started. It's going to take some time, though. Any other questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
So, I see Council Boschman, but I'm going to start. I was a cemetery employee 25 years ago, and I've been in that building several times when I worked for the city of Fitchburg. And I recall 25 years ago when my boss at the time, who's still there, Dan Roy, we would literally be putting buckets inside the building 25 years ago. And, I've been here for 16 years. I've never seen the previous administration or any council be presented with any amount of funds to do anything to this building because priorities, we all understand that. But the sad part about this, it harkens me back to City Hall, what happened with City Hall as an example. We waited to do something about City Hall when the building was condemned. I mean, talk about waiting until the 11th hour. It's not that the city didn't know problems existed. It's not that it didn't have the money in many respects. It just, other things just took precedent, whether it was poor management or funding this or that. But this city has a history, infrastructure-wise, with its buildings of waiting until the 11th hour, literally before the building's going to fall down, before it does something. And City Hall was a prime example of that. I look at the mausoleum and I look at my own history 25, 30 years ago when I was in that facility, and I can attest to, then, we didn't do anything then. We haven't done anything in the 16 years I've been on the council. It's just, but the problems have always been there, and now we're at a point where it looks disgusting. I mean, it's embarrassing. It's insulting to the people buried there. And I can't help but think to myself that if it truly will cost, let's just say it's $2.5 million, hell, call it $3 million, to refurbish the whole facility, what that would have cost us 25, 30 years ago. Obviously would have cost a fraction of that. And as someone who knows the budget better than my own budget, the city could have afforded it. Just didn't want to do it because they just didn't care. Whoever was running the city at the time didn't consider it a priority. There were ways to get around, there were ways to fund that facility. And now we're at a point where we either do something or that building's going to continue looking the way it does. So it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback. I understand that. I'll let my other colleagues speak if they want once I'm finished. But, I am going to support this because I will then become part of the problem that I just spoke of if I don't. This is the first time in my 16 years in the council I've seen a presentation of this nature about that facility. And because we're at such a crossroads now with what to do with it in terms of letting it continue to rot or fixing it, me voting against this would validate all the decisions we've made. The comment was made that nothing's really been done to this facility for over 50 years, 1972. So how many mayoral administrations did that span when the problems were known in the 70s and nothing was done? So for my constituents who are frustrated when they see stuff like this, because they're going to pay now the bill, just like City Hall, just like a school building, I can't answer why in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s, we didn't do anything. I wasn't there. I understand that when I started in 08 with Mayor Lisa Wong through like 2014, we all know how those 6 years were with the recession and our budgetary problems. We were trying to keep the lights on and not too much success. So I get that period. So now that we've been out of that recessionary period, because of the strength of our finances today, we are in a position where we can't afford to do something now. What's frustrating for me is we waited 50 years to do it. So I will support this. I am interested to see what the architects come up with for plans. It's going to be up to the mayor how he wants to move forward with whatever the findings are in terms of funding before it gets back to us. But he has signed off on sending this $100,000 your way, pending our approval. So I believe we have an obligation to the people that are buried there, and for historical purposes, to preserve it. And this is a first step, and we have to worry about the details later. The details can't come later unless we do this. This is required.
Right.
So let's see what we can find out from it. And to anybody in the public that doesn't want us to do this, realistically and practically, what is the alternative? Do we tear it down?
The only other alternative
move
would be
the
to
dead bodies?
remove the dead bodies, contact the families for permission to do so. I'm sure we'd be subject to some sort of legal ramifications and whatnot. And frankly, we don't have the space in the cemetery currently to bury an additional 380 individuals. We have 100 and change left available. So
Right, so we don't have the space. We're not going to demolish it because that'll cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We can't move the bodies. Even if we were successful in contacting some members, we're unlikely to contact all of them. I did hear a comment years ago from a resident who frequents that area that he said to me, why don't we have the families of the buried there paid to fix it up? I said, it's a public facility. It's on public land.
and they've already paid to entomb
And
their loved ones there.
they've paid, and that's the other point, my last point here, that's even adds to my frustration is, they have paid perpetual care fees.
Right.
It's not their fault the building is in collapse. It's our fault.
Well, the Perpetual Care Fund, if I might add, as I had mentioned earlier, when the mausoleum was built, the mausoleum builders opened a perpetual care account for $500. This is 2022, and there's only $3,000 in there.
Yeah, something
Somewhere
happened to the
along the way, money was distributed elsewhere.
I'll tell you what happened
which
to it. Whoever the mayors and the city
we don't
councils were at the
know.
time,
We have no way
they
of
raided
knowing.
the trust fund,
Yeah, we don't know.
and they sent the money somewhere else.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that sounds like the obvious reason, but we can't really, say that for a fact. However, $3,000 isn't going to help us at all. And I might add that Mr. Karlstad is here, and he has been through that building, and the building, we can't go in it. So in other words, anyone who has a loved one buried there, they have to get permission from the superintendent to enter the building. So it's not open now to the public at all because of the roof damage, the water damage, and the inside. It's just dangerous.
I can't imagine going in there today when I was in there 25 years ago and it was
Oh.
raining buckets.
I was there this summer, and Dan Roy let me in, and I took the pictures. I have more pictures here if you care to see them. And they were literally buckets everywhere, water 3 and 4 inches deep in there. And it's a shame because it's a beautiful facility, and it has this beautiful marble. And I just want to add that over the years, we've had people like Monty Tech come in and help redo the stairs. They tried to help us that way. We've had the roof redone a few times, but we always seem to get the wrong kind of contractor who doesn't hold up to his guarantees. So this is what's been going on since 1972. So I think it's time now that we at least, and I appreciate the mayor, who I have been hounding for months and months and months and years about this appropriation, to at least let us get started. And then we have a better idea once we have the architects and the contractors in there to see how much money we actually are going to need. Maybe it isn't going to be as much as we think. We don't know that yet. So it's my hope that you at least take it under consideration tonight.
Commissioner, we are past the point of Band-Aiding. There's no possibility of repairs. This has to have a restoration aspect to it, right?
We've tried repairs since the 70s to no avail. We've wasted money each time. It's beyond just a simple repair at this point. It needs to be looked at holistically as a single larger renovation.
Yeah, my last comment on this is I feel very embarrassed for the people that are buried there, where they're resting. I mean, it makes me sick. I've brought it up many times in the past, but I don't control the purse strings. But I'm glad to see something's finally getting done. It's better late than never. That seems to be the motto with our infrastructure needs going back 50, 60 years. So we need to get it started, and this is the first step that we have to perform. So I will support this. Councilor Boschman, you had your hand up?
Yeah. Wasn't the roof done a couple of years, not a couple of years, how many years ago?
I want to say 2016 or 2017, somewhere thereabouts.
Yes.
And I heard, well, wasn't the roof leaking after that for a while too? And how come we never went after the contractor? That's what our problems I'm having here.
Yeah, no,
We hire contractors, they do you can't say it on the air, S word, and we never do anything about it. I don't understand the logic. That's number one. Number two, you're talking $1.5 to $2.5 million if we send $100,000 out. You also told us approximately a month ago that once these 700 spaces are filled in, we're looking for a place across the street, and it's going to cost millions to develop. Millions. That's what you told.
Yep.
That's what I was told.
You're right.
Sometimes I think people think money grows on trees. We can just go in the backyard. I get this tree called the ginkgo tree, and I call it the money tree. And I tell my wife, go ahead and pick some leaves, and they might be $100 on them. You know, we don't have a lot of money.
If I can respond to that, Councilor Boschman, this is something that you are obligated, not you personally, but the city of Fitchburg is obligated to bury their dead. We have to do this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. So whether we do it now, or we do it in 5 years from now, or we do it in 20 years from now, we have to do it. And I will say that all this COVID money that's been distributed throughout the city, and now I'm going to be like you and get really upset, we were told we can't get any of that COVID money because we're not in the districts. We're not, we don't apply. We don't get that money. We had over 700 graves, and we, more or less, don't quote me, but now we have 134 graves. And that was all due to COVID deaths that cemetery crew and that superintendent and this commissioner had to deal with. So why don't we get any of that ARPA money? That's not right. And if you want to be talking about somebody who's upset, I'm upset because money gets put on everything else in this city, but on this project, which has been going on for as long as I can remember, even before when I was on the Friends of the Historical Cemetery Committee. So I'm on your side. Let's do it right, and stop messing around with these Band-Aids here and Band-Aids there. And that contractor you're talking about claims that someone went up on the roof and moved the stones around. And so therefore that violated his contract with us. If I was running the show, that would never have happened, trust me.
The other thing I want to say, what's the trustees do? I never saw the trustees come in front of this council.
I'm right here. I'm right here.
I get here tonight.
We're not here to discuss the trustees. We're here to discuss whether we're going to appropriate $100,000 to get this process started on the mausoleum. Can we stick to that, please? You got an issue with how the trustees operate, take it up with the guy who appoints the Board of Trustees. Let's not get into this. It has nothing to do with the matter at hand. The mausoleum's not going to magically repair itself based on what the trustees' makeup is or not, or what they do. So, do you have any other questions about the mausoleum?
Mr. Chair,
Do you have any other questions about the mausoleum?
I do have questions about.
Then ask the
I'm not
question.
happy with what's going on. I never was happy with what's going on. Every time I walked by there, I seen and I complained. And you know what? You sat on this council with me.
Well, Mr. Boltzmann,
Please. do you have any other questions for the Commissioner or the Board of Trustees Chair on the mausoleum order?
My question to you, Mr. Commissioner and Mr. Trustee, where is all this money going to come from? You're talking about across the street and millions of dollars there. Where is it all coming from?
Counselor, I'm sorry to interrupt. Counselor, that question is for the mayor of the city, not for them. They don't know where the money's going to come from. They have nothing to do with where the money comes from. That's Mayor DiNatale or whoever is in that seat. They can say it can come from the police department. It's not going to matter what they say, because if he won't do it, it doesn't matter. So, do you have any questions about the mausoleum project and the $100,000?
Are we going to get a good qualified candidate this time, or are we going to go with the lowest bidder?
For the OPM and architect, we have the freedom to select whomever that we choose, and we can hire a solid person to fill that role. When we go out to bid for construction, we have to follow Mass General Law, so we have to go with the low bidder. And sometimes that's a good contractor, and sometimes it's a bad contractor, but the quality of the construction documents will play a role in that as well. And that's our job, to make sure we produce quality construction documents. So if it doesn't happen, then that's a failure on my part, and I'll own that. But let's get to that point before we start pointing fingers.
Did you, no, okay, go right ahead. Are you all set? Okay.
Be my guest, I'll come back later.
President Zarella?
Thank you. First, I just want to second a few points and confirm this is something we have to do. It's also something we should be doing, but it's, regardless, something that we have to do. We can't decide, well, it's too much money, so we're not going to create more burial space because we can spend our money on other things. That's the kind of thing that, once again, would wind up with us getting some kind of court order or consent decree or things we don't want to monkey with. I will say it was my understanding when I went through the ARPA stuff on a different matter that it would be a stretch to work cemetery things into the ARPA funding, which is a shame, but I don't know that it's necessarily anything we or the mayor can do anything about with regard to that particular funding stream. Could you come up with a rationale for it? Probably, but, you know, it would be a stretch. But that said, we have an obligation to these people, to the families who currently are attempting to visit their loved ones, and to the deceased who we made implicit promises to when we put them there in the first place. You know, that their resting place would be maintained, would be respectable. And like I've said many times, ultimately, before we think of pragmatic considerations, before we think of financial considerations, we have to live up to our obligations. That's first and foremost. So I am very much in support of getting the ball rolling on this. I hope that we can do it at an affordable price point, but affordable or not, it's got to get done. We can't just let these people languish and let the families try to visit a dilapidated building to try to, you know, visit their loved ones, pay their respects. So I'll be voting in favor.
Councilor Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I do want to echo the remarks of my colleagues about needing to do this, and your comments about no more Band-Aids, because we tend to have that approach sometimes, and I disagree with it. I do want to ask a couple questions. The $100,000, how did you guys come up with this regarding the cost estimates, renderings, things of that nature?
So that was a number put together by us and Mr. Carlstead, who's sitting right behind us. So Russ has been an architect for over 40 years. He's very familiar with what it takes to get this type of work done, and that's a number that he's confident we'll get this done. It depends on the current climate in the marketplace for these types of things. So we'll make sure to get it done with the $100,000. If it costs less, great. If it costs a little more, we'll figure it out. But that's a number which we feel comfortable with putting forth an RFQ and trying to get someone on board.
Okay. And my second question, because this is such a historical building and it has such history, have we been looking into grants, historical grants, preservation grants, things of that nature to help us fund this project? That way we're not just dipping into the general reserves?
It's my understanding as trustees, because we are technically employees of the city, that we can't look for grants. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been told. We don't have a grant writer that I'm aware of. If you know of someone and you can help us out, then please let me know. I'd be sure, I'd be happy to investigate it. I don't have an answer for that question.
Mm-hmm. We've looked at a few different things throughout the years. At least that's what I've kind of found with my research. Kind of new to the role of commissioner, obviously, so this is kind of the first time that I've investigated all of this. But one of the things that I did run across is that there's been some talk about designating that structure as a historical structure, but there's been concern about when we do so, there's certain construction requirements that brings along. So that tends to drive up the construction costs for repairs such as this to historic structures. So a window that would cost $1,000 normally, for example, would become $5,000, and so on and so forth. So if you add up those little costs over the entire structure, what would be a $1.5 to $2.5 million price tag might be 3 or 4 times that. So I think that was the concern that was identified in some of the documents that I found for backing off from that historical designation. Mm-hmm. I have not personally pursued any grants for the repair here. We could certainly do so, and that might be something we have to do in order to get the construction piece funded. But right now, I think there's somewhat a sense of urgency in at least getting an architect and an engineer on board to understand exactly what the total amount that we're going to need is. And then once we have that number, maybe even working with that architect and engineer on some sort of a grant application to reduce the impact to the city's bottom line.
Mm-hmm. That's something I'd certainly like to see. And for other departments, how their grants are working out, to answer your question about the trustees, because I know that other boards and trustees do that kind of research and facilitate things for themselves. So definitely something to look into. One
other comment on that, too. Before Tom Skorowski left, he did indicate that the mausoleum probably would not fall under ARPA just because of the nature of the project, but the expansion across Electric Ave there that Councillor Boschman was referring to might actually fall under that category. So it's something that we need to continue to look into, I guess, with this second round of ARPA funding.
Absolutely, I agree. That's something to definitely need to explore, because if it's COVID deaths that are causing the excess, then it would make perfect sense that we'd be able to use that fund for that.
Right.
That's all I've got for questions. I yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Van Hazinga.
Sure, I have just some brief comments. As mentioned, we do have a responsibility as a city to take care of our dead. So if we're not going to renovate this building, we have to find a place to put these souls. You mentioned that there's 380 people buried there now. What's the total capacity? I missed that.
418?
480, I believe.
480.
480, yes.
We only currently have 134 plots available in the cemetery?
In the cemetery itself, yes.
And how many new ones will be created as part of the current project with the new retaining wall?
A little less than 700 with the new expansion area. Yeah.
So if we have to exhume and reinterment these bodies, it will eat up half of our available plots.
Right.
So it seems like we have no alternative. It's either this or I hate to think of the alternative.
Well, I don't think you'd really want to try to exhume bodies from this mausoleum to place in the ground. I think, as Councilor Zarella had said, there might be a lot of legality to that, and I don't know how you would find some of these people's, ancestors or descendants. I mean, and then they'd have to give permission. So what if they didn't give permission? What would you do then? So,
No, the difficulty and cost is unfathomable, and to have to deal with this if the building collapses is even worse. So I don't think we have any other alternative but to do what we need to do to provide for this. Thank you.
So I had Councilor Boschman's hand up for the second time, and he had a question for the mayor on
Go to the desk.
future funding for this project that this money would be tied to. You can either sit in your chair, Mayor, or up front, doesn't, okay.
Counselor, you have a question for me? By all means, what is it?
My question to you, sir, if we approve this $100,000 and they come back and they tell us that it's going to cost $1.5 to $2.5 million, where are we going to get the funds? Knowing the simple fact that we're looking for a new piece of land, which is going to cost millions of dollars, so we can bury our beloved people that we have. Where are we getting all this money? This is what I want to know.
Counselor, this is a little premature for me to identify where I'm going to find $2.5 million. Let's just say $3 million. Let's say $3.5 million. I don't know. We'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it, as they say. But first of all, I think it's important to determine what is the cost going to be. We've thrown out 1.5 to 2.5. I don't know. Is it that much? Maybe it's less. Of course, nothing's ever less. But let's wait to see what the study comes back with. That's my suggestion.
One other question. My question to the trustees, are you planning to help alleviate some of this cost by raising the rates of burial fees again?
we have raised
Yes, I know.
the rates on the burials, and we are going to look at it in every 2 to 3 years. We have a lot of people in the city who don't have a lot of money either, so we have to be sensitive to that. But you are right, Councilor Boschman. We are looking at that, and we have been making some increases slightly. We did have a big increase from the last, I think, 2014 to probably 2018 or so. There was quite a increase in the price. But we are looking at that, and we're going to revise those prices as we go along, yes.
All right. I just want to make it very clear to you and the public. It's not that I'm disrespecting the people that pass away. I have no problem with the people who pass away. I got loved ones in the cemetery, too. My problem is the way we do things in Fitchburg. It doesn't make sense. We pay over here, then we're coming back and we're paying again.
I
And I'm
agree.
tired of paying.
I
And the
agree.
people of Fitchburg are tired of paying. You hear it all the time.
I'm a taxpayer too, and I own property, and I owned a business in Fitchburg. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you 120%. This is a building that needs to be looked at, and it needs to be repaired, remodeled, whatever the term is that you want to use. And if we don't do that, then we have the alternative. So I am grateful that this order has been put on the docket tonight, and I'm hoping that you will all consider voting in favor of it. And I, as long as I'm trustee, will give you my word that I will keep my finger on the pulse of that.
But let me say something before you go.
Okay.
Don't say thank you to the mayor, say thank you to his wife, that's your sister, because he must have been on his tail.
No, I think I was on his tail more than her. But regardless, it's something that needs to be done, and we don't, that isn't even an issue right now.
All right.
Okay, well,
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve Order 27022.
Second.
Do you have a brief question?
you
that
do?
you'd like to
Could we
ask?
hold on the motion,
Rescind my
please?
motion.
Councilor Zarella?
I have one brief question for the commissioner and the trustees, and then one for the mayor that is admittedly very slightly off topic, so if you'd like me to hold off, I can.
Given your track record on the committee, I will allow it.
Thank you. So my question to you two, playing off of the comment that, sure. Just playing off the comment that Councillor Van Hazinga made and Councillor Boschman's concerns, can you just confirm my understanding that the cost of renovating this mausoleum will be drastically less than the cost of creating that many new graves in an addition. Like if we consider the price of the addition that we're already going to need to build, if we were to consider how many of those graves would be taken up by moving the bodies, even not including any of the legalities or other concerns, it's still a lot cheaper to keep them where they are and repair the mausoleum, correct?
Yes. So the only viable spot for cemetery expansion, aside from what we just undertook, is across from Electric Ave. And that site, due to the terrain, is very challenging. So it's going to require a lot of site work, a lot of drainage. And the estimates that we got years and years ago were in the millions of dollars. Factor in the increases in costs that we're seeing now, you're talking 2 to 3 times that. So we're probably talking the tens of millions of dollars now. So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to confirm for my colleagues and the public that, yes, there's going to be a price tag on this, and it's not going to be one that we are going to particularly love, but it's still a better bargain than not doing this. Again, even leaving our obligations to one side and the legalities to one side, it's also financially our best option. Yeah. And then, Mr. Mayor, the one question I had for you, which was raised briefly by the chairperson, is there anyone in City Hall who boards and commissions that don't otherwise have staff can consult with on the prospect of seeking grant funding for things?
Normally, these kinds of issues, and we're talking about a grant, someone who could pursue some kind of a grant funding,
yes.
Community development would really would take that role on.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to.
In saying that, their plate is full as well. So it would be a challenge. But I would come to you, the council, and ask for 3 or 4 more people, and I'm sure you'd give me that, right?
You find us the room in the budget.
Okay, that's right. Exactly. But that's the challenge. It's we can have a conversation. The acting executive director, Liz Murphy. I mean, we can raise that issue with her and see if there's. I know there's a couple of people that come to mind on her staff that could help.
Okay.
And there are federal. I'm sure there are federal and state vehicles that might address this. We'll have to check.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to check in on that before I forgot, and I appreciate the latitude from the committee on that.
It's related. Yeah.
Just to add to that, too, DPW itself, me personally, we do go after grants as frequently as we can. The administrative time commitments to do so are usually pretty heavy. So we do it when we can. We've got a solid staff of individuals that help me write the grants, administer them, manage the finances and whatnot. So with community development, we'll put our heads together and try to see what's out there.
Excellent. And I hope I didn't imply otherwise. I've always been very happy with how the city departments aggressively pursue grant funding.
I've just heard from various constituents that they don't see DPW or anyone in the city going after grants, and I just want everyone to be aware that that's patently false.
Absolutely. We see grant orders on this committee regularly, 5, 6, 7 a month sometimes. So, thank you.
Motion to approve 270-22.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 270-22. If there are no objections, I will take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilors.
Thank you very much.
271-22, a loan order that $140,000 is appropriated to pay costs of the city's compliance with the proposed lead and copper rule revisions as set forth in the following loan order. Deputy Water Commissioner DeLine, would you like to provide comment on this, sir, or would you like me to read your letter?
If you want to read the letter, that's fine. I'm
Okay.
getting over COVID a couple of weeks ago, and I keep coughing, so
Okay.
I don't want to The less I speak, the better.
The letter from Commissioner DeLine to the mayor on November 8th states as follows. I am writing to request authorization to borrow up to $140,000 to pay costs of the city's compliance with the Mass DEP's lead and copper rule revisions, including costs of creating a water service inventory for the city's water system, reviewing and updating the current lead and copper sampling plan, developing a lead service line replacement plan, and all costs incidental and related thereto. This work is necessary to identify the presence of any lead water lines within the city's water distribution system. Although we do not believe there are any, in order to comply with revisions to the lead and copper rules, Mass Department of Environmental Protection is requiring that all water systems complete this inventory analysis. In order to assist public water suppliers with the work, Mass DEP is making grants available for completing these tasks. The Water Division has applied for this grant, but in order to meet the requirements set by Mass DEP, we must demonstrate that the City Water Division has approved borrowing for this work. If we are awarded the grant, it is expected that Mass DEP will forgive the loan of $140,000 that is being requested. If we do not receive the Mass DEP grant, the Water Division will seek alternative funding methods of completing the inventory analysis of the 11,000 plus water service lines. Thank you for your assistance in this matter. So, committee members, if there's any questions you have for the Deputy Water Commissioner, now is the time. My only question to the Deputy Water Commissioner is, considering this is, this loan may or may not be necessary based on Mass DEP grant approval, do you have any idea when we'll hear from Mass DEP on an award, if any?
I'm hoping by January sometime, so it's not too far out, but.
So in the condition to apply for the grant would have to be that we're willing to pay it ourselves? Or fund?
Yes, that the council will, that the city will approve the borrowing for it.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a change of procedure. We used to best be able to have Calvin as a city auditor provide a letter that, the funds were available, but Mass DEP's kind of changed their procedures and now requires that, there's a formal vote by the governing body, council, or board of selectmen per se, to actually borrow this money for this type of project for the grant.
So it would be fair to say that if we didn't support this, there's no likelihood we get state funding for this?
Correct. And we don't get grants for water mains, but we go for after every, my next ones are grants too, but, again, going back to grants, we go back after every grant that we can to help us. This is a huge project going through all 11 services, analyzing all the materials, and all the related work to it that, we're very short-staffed and we have a difficult time doing it in-house. If we can get this money to have an outside firm complete this work for us, it'll help us meet the, what Mass DEP is requiring so that we remain in compliance, but also, relieve us from quite a bit of work that we may not even be able to get to do and meet the deadlines that are required. So,
questions?
Motion to
Mr.
approve?
Chair.
Oh,
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'll hold my
Could
motion.
you ask them if we don't get the grant, what happens? We have to pay it out of ourselves, $140,000?
The letter, as stated, said that if we do not get the grant, we will have to find a way to fund it. But the catch-22 is if we don't approve this, there is no possibility of getting a grant. It's more likely we will get the grant if we show a commitment. That's part of their requirement. So for the purposes of this discussion, if we vote no, we're on the hook, guaranteed. If we vote yes, it's less likely we're on the hook.
All right.
So, Councilor Van Hazinga?
Just real quickly, so this is also work we don't have a choice about doing. We have to do this, correct?
exactly. We have to remain in compliance with the new regulations that are coming out. So we're trying to get ahead of the, ahead of the curve by acquiring this grant and having our consultants start working on it. And just to answer the question, if we didn't get the grant and didn't have this funding, we'd have to do it in-house and also probably, have our consultant assist with it. Under this grant, we'll be able to have the consultant do most of the work. We'll still assist them, but they're going to do most of the work, which would be a huge help to us because we're very busy as it is and short-staffed, and it'd be difficult for us to complete it. We'd somehow get it done, but yeah, it's absolutely necessary for us to remain in compliance with the drinking water regulations.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Zarella.
I won't belabor the point because everyone's heard it from me a bunch of times, but I will just note that knowing that an expensive state requirement was coming down the pipeline, no pun intended, and dragging our heels on it until we had to be forced into compliance
Separation.
is exactly what got us into the situation that we've all been frustrated with, including, I'm sure, the DPW and the water wastewater divisions, with sewer separation and mandatory plant upgrades and all that sort of thing. Those are all things that we could have done at a fraction of the cost if we had done them when we originally found out that we would need to do them, well predating anyone on the council or in the administration right now. But, you know, this is something where we have a chance to not make the mistakes that we've been trying to fix for as long as any of us have been on this council. So let's do it right and do it when we first find out about it this time.
Make a motion to approve 271-22.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 271-22. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's approved. 272-22. I'm going to take up, Deputy Commissioner, are the next three all together regarding the
Yes,
land
they are.
conservation? Okay, so 272-22, 273-22, and 274-22 are all orders pertaining to the tract of land in Ashburnham known as the Curlinger property. 272-22 is for $140,370. That is a grant from the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for the cost of purchasing a conservation restriction on certain parcels of land in Ashburnham known as the Curlinger property. So that's a grant. 273-22 is $100,000 of city funds from the Water Enterprise Fund, from reserve for land purchases and credit to water capital expenses, land purchases. So 272 is a grant from the state. 273 is enterprise water funds for the purchase. And then 274-22 is the authorization order to obtain a conservation restriction on this parcel of land known as the Curlinger property, which is approximately 49.43 acres of land located at 220 Russell Hill Road, Ashburnham, within the watershed to Lavelle Reservoir. So I'm going to take these all together. Councilor Zarella.
Before we even start discussing or debating, just because I know this comes up every time when we're dealing with enterprise funds, we don't deal with them every day, so that it can sometimes get a little complicated. I want to note that the $100,000 that we're being asked to appropriate here is, first of all, solely from the Water Department's fund, not from the general fund. Mm-hmm. And it's from a line item that was already set aside to be expended precisely on this sort of project.
Correct. Yep.
So this is not the city needing to pay additional money for this, and this is not money that is being diverted from anything else that the Water Department would otherwise be using it for.
Correct. This is covered under the general water bills that residents and businesses pay on a monthly basis. So it's already baked into the water budget. Mm-hmm. So, yep.
That's all.
Yep.
I yield the floor.
Okay. Councilor Van Huizinga?
I'd just like to ask the Deputy Commissioner if he could just quickly explain why the purchase of this property is important to our drinking water.
Sure. We actually, I I had come before the council earlier this year, the spring months, late winter months, and to apply for this actual grant. We were awarded the grant, which in total is with the first order, 140,000 some change. But this property falls within the northern watershed. And I'm gonna share my screen if I can here, just to show it. Did that come up?
No.
It says you've started screen sharing. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
We see it.
Okay, so you can see where the red outline is, that's where the property is. The cross-hatched area is an actual tributary. It actually eventually flows down to Level Reservoir. The pinkish area is a Zone C, which is the next zone of protection. The tributary, of course, is the most important zone. But preventing this property from being developed will ensure that, we don't have any contamination, silt, and things like that eventually get into the watershed that we would have to treat somewhere down the road. With this particular property, we've actually asked for some enhanced restrictions per se. Because of the steep slopes on the property, we didn't really want to see any type of farming. They could do some forestry management, but no farming, animals, horses. They could have dogs or whatever. There's a house on the property that's excluded, but they could have dogs and things like that, but no farm animals. We're really trying to make sure that there's no nutrients from manure or things like that get into the watershed. And by protecting this parcel, just part of many parcels in there. I don't have a map showing how much is actually protected up there, but it does fit in with much of the protected upland up there. It will ensure that the water is protected, water quality-wise, but also in terms of volume. Once a piece of property is developed and it's hardened surfaces, the water runs off quickly and passes through the reservoir more quickly. So this will allow this to be protected, and then the water, instead of being in driveways or houses, roofs and things like that, the water will, slowly percolate down through the ground and slowly make it to the reservoir. So there's a couple, important things there. The other thing is this watershed also contributes to Baker Brook. So besides the drinking water aspect of it, preventing this from development, also prevent, increase in runoff from these areas, which impacts John Fitch Highway. So, every time I look at a piece of land in the watershed, not only are we thinking about drinking water, but also making sure that we don't have, additional areas of hardened services that will end up, contributing to any additional flooding down on the John Fitch Highway area. So there's an added benefit in that respect. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And so this is part of a larger effort to purchase other conservation restrictions on neighboring properties in this area of the city to protect the safety of our water supply long term. So I appreciate the long-term planning.
Absolutely.
Yes. I appreciate the long-term planning on part of the city in following through and getting the grants to pay for the majority of this. There is some cost to the city, but it's something we have to do to make sure we have clean water to drink. And I yield the floor.
Thank you.
Councilor Boschman.
Mr. Chair, do we use the Conservation Commission if we're buying land and we're buying the watershed around it, the land around it? Does the City of Fitchburg Conservation Commission get involved in any of this?
No, actually, all those watershed protection areas that were delineated years ago by the state, they want to make sure that, even water systems that may not be as proactive as us for protecting our watershed, that they identify areas that fall within watershed. So all the protection zones around, whether it's surface waters, wells, or things like that, have already been delineated on state maps, and that's what we fall back to. And it's all based on topography and where the water flows. It's really pretty straightforward mapping.
All right. And what about this new thing coming out, what you read about in the paper, PFAB, I think you call it?
Yes.
How is that? You take studies for that on these lands?
We do test for it. We have detected it in our reservoirs out toward the Westminster area. We haven't detected it in the reservoirs in the northern watershed, and I believe that's because the northern watershed is better protected than the reservoirs out in the Westminster area, particularly Meeting House, which is nearer to downtown Westminster. There's a lot more roadways that pass through there that are more heavily traveled than the ones in our northern watershed. But we have detected some low levels. Having said that, Mass DEP did a study a couple of years ago of streams throughout the state, even ones that you would expect to be in a pristine area in Western Mass on the Vermont border. And there's low levels of PFAS in pretty much every water body in the state. It's unfortunate that's the case, but us seeing 3 or 4 parts per trillion, which is well below Mass DEP's 20 part per trillion limit, is not unusual given its pervasiveness throughout the state and just about every water body you see.
All right, I give it up.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All
So,
three.
I have a motion made and seconded to approve all 3 orders together. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, they are approved. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, last item on the agenda. 27522, a resolution that pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 32, Section 103J, City Council hereby approves the increase in the maximum base amount on which the cost of living adjustment is calculated from $12,000 to $14,000 as accepted by the Fitchburg Contributory Retirement Board during a meeting held on October 25th, 2022. Auditor Brooks, I believe you're the chair of the board?
I am the chair, yes.
So
Yes, sir.
would you like to expand on this?
Yes, thank you, Counselor. I want to start by saying the retirement board is made up of 5 members. As city auditor, I'm an ex officio member, meaning I'm one of the 5 members. The mayor has an appointee who is here tonight, Mary Kringen. The members and retirees get to elect 2 members to this board. Tad Daddio is one. I believe he's here tonight. The other is Anna Farrell, who could not make it. The 5th member is elected by the other 4, John Brown, who should be here tonight as well. And that's what the board is made up of. I believe that, councilors, you were handed a copy of the funding schedule for the Fitchburg Contributory Retirement System, which shows that the unfunded liability that the city has, or the retirement system has, will be paid off in 10 years. It's assuming a 5.5% increase in the scheduled contribution each year. And this was something that I think I had mentioned a couple of months ago when we were talking about the Crocker School project and the library project and debt service, handing out the red sheet and commenting on the fact that we will be squeezed for the next 5 years or 7 years maybe to meet the terms of those borrowings. But in the distance, in 10 years, will be the full funding of the retirement system. And you can see that in 2033, the required contribution goes from 26 million down to 9 million. I'm not saying that that's what it's going to be exactly at that time, but that's the direction we're headed. And when that required contribution goes down, that frees up $10-15 million that can be used for other things, primarily, and I would assume primarily capital projects that we would have to undertake. We do review this funding schedule every 2 years and can modify it based on what our experience has been in the markets. We have all of our investments with PRIT, the Pension Reserve Investment Trust, and as long as that's continuing to go up, we benefit from that. The other thing is that as we get closer to full retirement, we'll have to see how full funding is defined, because we can be full funded, and then if the market crashes, we could be at 90%, or if the market does really well, we can be at 110%. So as we get closer to full funding, we will have to kind of soften the increase, and it'll change slightly. with that in mind, as part of the funding schedule and the evaluation we had to do, we asked the actuary to include within two changes going forward. One is going from a 3% to a 5% COLA for this year. And that's an item that will be sent to City Council for its next meeting, and I think Finance will get it for its next meeting. So I don't really want to dwell on that at this point. The other is to increase the COLA base. When COLAs are granted, we grant a 3% COLA on the first $12,000 of pension benefit. So the most that a retiree gets for a COLA is $360 a year, or an additional $30 a month. So per retiree, we're not talking about a lot of money. And because of the limit of $12,000, there isn't some built-in benefit to retirees who are getting pensions that are substantially higher than that. What we have asked is for an increase of the base from $12,000 to $14,000, so that to reflect the fact that pensions are going up a little bit. There has been some inflation. There is some just time passing. I know a lot of communities have already gone to 13 and are considering 14. Some communities are at 16 or 18,000. I think Fitchburg has stayed at 12 for quite some time, given the financial constraints the city has been under and where the retirement system was with its funding. Now that the funding is in reasonably good shape, we seem to have a good direction that we're going in. The board felt it important to give an increase in the COLA base from 12 to 14,000. By statute, this requires the approval of City Council, and for that reason, we have come before the council tonight.
So I'll start, because this sheet here, this amortization schedule, this is what makes budgetary decisions extremely difficult for the rest of everything inside the city budget. These expenses dominate the city budget. Just this year alone, we saw over a $900,000 increase in 1 year in the fund contributions that we owe. Fitting that we have a tax classification next, anytime a resident says to me, why are their property taxes increasing? This is the very first reason why they're increasing. This. I understand employees pay into the system, and it's not the employee's fault that we, on the city side, were grossly negligent in our management of the system. I believe that mayors long ago did not properly fund these systems at what we should have at the time. We used overly aggressive return on investment rates. How confident are you, Mr. Brooks, in the 5.5%? I know that's what we've been holding to. Is that typically what we've been falling at? Because one of the reasons we fell into such a hole in our pension debt is because we were using far too aggressive return on investment rates. And even after we weren't meeting them, we were still using them because, in my opinion, we were trying to hide the real impact to the taxpayers as long as we could, because this is what's driving our budget increases. So is this 5.5% based on historical actual? Have we been really close to it? Because this could really make or break a given fiscal year and the schedule if we're not really doing 5.5%.
Correct. I believe the earnings assumption in this schedule is a 7% return on investment. The 5.5%.
I'm sorry.
Is the amount that the schedule contribution increases each year.
Right, my apologies. You're right. That was my question, was the return on investment. So, but in our you said 7%.
7%.
In our assumptions that we put in with the actuaries when they draft these schedules,
Yep.
are we using 7%?
Yes.
And is that what we've been falling at, give or take, closely? What have we been realizing for a rate of return?
I guess I would say on average, that's what we've been getting. It depends on year to year. This particular schedule was based on our assets on January 1st. If you follow the market, you know the market's gone down this year, and so we have less assets than at the beginning of the year.
Yep.
That's why we do this every 2 years and not every year or every hour. But we felt comfortable in that figure. And that's one of the, I think the 7% is what's being used right now. If not, some systems are going to a 6 3/4%.
So is it fair to say, for historical perspective on the background of this funding sheet, because, given the fact that employees contribute into the system, and we have these invested into, the markets that yield a rate of return that, if we have a favorable year on the stocks, we have less that we owe, but like anything in the stock market, it can go up and it can go down. Is it fair to say that the reason why this unfunded liability is so large at this time is because of poor management practices on the city's end over 40, 50 years? I mean, we're not alone. Everybody in the state is way behind on their pension debt, other than the Golden City next door. But they didn't give their retirees a raise in like 8 or 9 years. But other than them, because they're an anomaly, is it fair to say that that's why we're at this point? And I'm asking this because when residents get this information, they do not understand why we're in this hole. And I typically say to them, it's a whole combination of factors. One, overly aggressive rate of return analysis. We're not properly funding what we should be funding on our end. And also factors beyond our control. I know people are living longer. Employee payroll up and down, but the real main factor is bad management, is it not? And that's why we're paying the price now?
I think what's happened is that when back in the late 80s, the state began to require retirement systems to fund their pension system. Prior to the mid 80s, everything was running on a pay-as-you-go kind of a process. So that as we were given 40 years to fully fund the system, and that would have been 2028. So all the systems had to begin to work on funding schedules and finding a way to build up their assets. The 2028 deadline, was pushed off to 2030, and now it's at 2040. Back in 2008, they gave us another 10 years. To recognize that some systems just couldn't quite get there as fast as others. I think in Fitchburg's case, it's a situation where we have had a lot of retirees who were getting pensions, and the city was, through a combination of things, not able to pay as quickly as other communities. And I think there was perhaps some stretches where the retirement system working with the city was trying to not push that increase quite as hard as they could have. I want to say in maybe 2012, the funding schedule began to set up so that we were in the 5.5 that you see now had been 8% for 3 years or 4 years, and then 6% thereafter. The last valuation we did was all 6%. And this year, because of how well we're doing, we could drop it down to 5.5%.
No, so the system has been managed a lot better in the last decade. There's no question about that. And
Yes.
That's a testament to you and the administration and Ms. Cronin sitting next to me, along with the retirement board. But, there's a lot of factors that go into play. I still hold on to my previous statement that I think that there were some things that the city were aggressive on in their assumptions and pushing things to the side. But what's good about these actuarial tables is it keeps us honest now. And basically, these are just recommendations, correct? These funding amounts. We're not bound to fund these numbers. But if we don't fund these numbers, the fully funded status keeps going down, farther away until we hit that ceiling of 2040 when, under state law, we have to be fully funded.
You're mostly correct. Once we set a funding schedule, that is what the city, the Housing Authority, and the Redevelopment Authority are required to pay.
Okay, so we're held to this.
We are for the next 2 years, yes.
Okay, for the next 2 years, okay.
Right. And then there's a new valuation, and we can do a new funding schedule.
Okay.
And you could put a funding schedule that has lower increases and goes out to 2040 to the absolute deadline. The problem is if the markets crash, you're stuck because there's no way to extend the schedule to accommodate a certain rough patch.
No, we have to accelerate our efforts as fast as we can, in my opinion, to reach fully funded status.
Yep.
Because as my colleagues can see on this schedule, in that year of 2032, when you go from 26 million that we have to put into the budget, and then the next year it's less than 10 million, can everybody imagine what we would be able to do if we had 16 million freed up? I mean, that's not even heard of for our history. That is just an example of how big of a fund this is in regards to the consummation of our budget, what it consumes. So, and the increases that were dealt with every year. I see increases on the schedule of over $1 million in just 1 year. And so when we talk about, raising property taxes or raising property tax levies, the tax levy increase is about $1.5 million. Well, over $1 million of that is consumed by this one line item alone. And we are obligated, and we cannot avoid doing this. So there is a method behind why things are what they are. So I am encouraged to see this schedule in terms of we're getting close, and I think there should be a big party thrown once we hit it, because it's a milestone, but it's a milestone that everyone's trying to achieve in this state. As I said before, there are many, more than half at least, that are in the same position we're in. So this is necessary. So my other question is, you said that on the 12,000 as the base, 360 is the maximum amount that a retiree can get in an increase for the year?
Yes.
So if I have a salary of 100,000, or my pension is based off 100,000, I only get an increase off the first 12?
Correct.
Okay. Just making sure the public understands that. And so by increasing the base from 12 to 14, the most that a retiree can get in an increase is now going from 360 to 420.
Correct.
So $60,
Correct.
which is
$5
a month. That's a cup of coffee. So, all right. So I just wanted to make sure we're clear on that. So what we're doing tonight is we're being asked to increase the base from 12 to 14, which would increase the payments, the increases annually from 360 to 420.
Yes.
And this funding schedule, does this funding schedule account for that change?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And just, by the way, this increase would take effect on next July 1st of 2023.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about pensions, we have to be cognizant of the fact that, with inflation, the economy, we balance this with what people in the private sector are getting, if they're getting raises or not. But I think it has to be emphasized to the public that what we're deciding here tonight is really a $60 change, from 360 to 420, so $5 a month. And many other communities in the Commonwealth are gravitating towards a higher base right now because of the market forces and because when's the last time we've changed the base? I don't recall ever changing the base.
No, Fitchburg has not changed the base.
Right, so it's never even been touched. Okay. Councilor Zarella.
Thank you. I have two questions. neither of which I know anything about the answer to. So one is, this is not an area of law I've had any opportunity to study. Is there anything in the statutes that would allow us, probably not tonight, but either by ordinance or by future vote of the retirement board, to index this base either to CPI or to some other metric so that it keeps up to some degree with inflation and rising pensions and so forth without requiring us to vote on it once every 5 years or so?
I'm going to say no, that the statute allows for $1,000 increments to be accepted by the board and approved by city council.
Gotcha. Okay, and then my other question is, because I am very much not a finance guy, as you know by now, Auditor Brooks, I see the big picture of it, but the details I need explained to me. Is this, assuming we approve this, you said this was part of the plan for getting us to fully funded. Does this actually increase or decrease our total funding target? I assume increase, but...
Yes, there would be an added cost. That added cost is figured into the funding schedule that you have.
Okay, excellent. I don't have any objection to that. I just wanted to make sure I understood it properly. No, I think this makes perfect sense. I think that, again, it's kind of a theme tonight. We've got obligations. We need to meet them. And even if we are technically meeting our legal obligations to our retirees by level funding this at, keeping the base at 12, in effect, in practical effect, we're giving them less and less each year if we do that. So I think people who put in their time with the city, who stayed long enough to have pensions and retirement benefits and everything, we need to live up to our obligations to them as well, and we need to do right by them as they've done right by us. I'm in support.
Calvin, I just had one other question. I'm sorry, Council Van Huizenga. Just another clarifier for the public, because I get asked this a lot too. If the employees are paying into their funds out of their paychecks, correct?
Yes.
Since that happens, why then are the taxpayers on the hook for these monumental increases every year? I get asked the question all the time, if they've paid into it, why do we owe anything? And that goes back to my first question about management, that there is so the employees are not fully paying for their benefit, or are they?
Correct.
They're not fully paying for it. We always, as the city, like health insurance, we would pay a portion, they would pay a portion, right?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that the portion that we are responsible for paying, we didn't do our side? I mean, we didn't do our part in what we were owing to those funds for whatever reason?
It initially was a pay-as-you-go system, where the city would pay in what it needed to in order to meet the retirement benefits.
Right, as you go.
And as I say, in the late 80s, the state made the determination that we needed to fund those pension systems.
But it's a misconception that the employees are paying 100% of their benefit. They're paying a portion of it, like they do health insurance premiums. We have our own portion that we pay ourselves.
Right.
And that portion is what's been largely unfunded because of the 80s and all these moving forces that weren't really going in our favor.
Correct.
So the last thing I'll say is the money's always been owed. It's just the payments are not stretched out as far because we have such a tight window to meet the obligation. So that's why the payments are a lot bigger every year.
Correct. Ultimately, when it's fully funded, what we're paying each year, and if you look at the funding schedule in 2034, there's a $3 million figure. That's the the normal cost. That's the cost that the city would have to pay to compensate current employees for this year of
Right.
work
Right.
and the pension benefit that they're earning at that time.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Council Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we heard that this is a relatively small increase for each recipient who's collecting a pension.
Yes.
What is the total effect on what we were paying out on an annual basis with this change?
So the cost of this change and the 5% COLA, which will be coming at the next meeting, was about 4.1 million on the unfunded liability. And so I figured that 4.1 is just being spread out over 10 years.
All right, but that's sort of a lifetime cost. That's not for just what we're paying out this year.
Correct, correct.
What would be the effect, like how many people are collecting?
Okay. So right now, we have about 600 retirees. So the added cost, we said $60, so that would be $36,000.
Okay.
If my math is right, you can check with Councilor Boschman on that.
That's right.
So, okay, so you said we have 600 retirees right now?
They're approximately 600, yes.
Approximately 600.
Times $600, times $60.
Well, it's actually less than that because that's the total increase, not necessarily because it's only 2,000.
Right, but the 360 to the 420, the 3% off of the 14.
So we're looking at a 5% increasing that.
No,
That's the next meeting.
We're not talking about 5%.
Okay. So we're looking at the 3% times the 2,000.
Right, it's 2,000 times 3%, which is $60,
Okay.
times 600 employees. And it actually is going to be a little bit less than that because there could be about 100, 150 retirees who are currently less than $14,000 in pension.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so just to sum up, the total cost of this measure tonight and the 5% adjustment next week, or next meeting, is estimated to be about $4.1 million over the next 10 years.
That would be, they're estimating that is the liability for making this change, the unfunded liability for making that change.
That's the added unfunded liability to making the change, $4 million over the next 10 years, so about $400,000 a year.
Correct.
For this specific change tonight, the added cost in 1 year would be $36,000.
Yes.
Because of the $2,000 adjustment in the base times $60, that's your $36,000.
Yep.
And that $36,000 increase is part of that 4.1. It compounded over the 10 years. So
Yeah, I would say if times 10 would be,
about 3.6,
360, okay.
about times 10, it would be 360,000.
yes.
So the lion's share of that $4 million is what we're going to be discussing next meeting. This is a small fraction of that $4 million.
No, no, because the next one should be smaller.
All right, well, I don't want to,
Yeah,
some math exercise here, so
yeah.
this is, so I don't want to bore everybody, but
I went to law school, so I would not.
it's 4.1 million over 10 years added to the unfunded liability for both these measures.
Yep.
For this particular measure, it's $36,000 of an increase over the 600 employees in 1 year, from the base changing from 12 to 14,000 times the 3%. Correct?
I'm sorry, would you say that again? I'm just checking my math.
So it's a $4.1 million increase in the unfunded liability over the next 10 years
Yep.
between this measure tonight and the one we're going to discuss next meeting.
Correct.
For this specific measure tonight, it was stated that there's 600 retirees times $60 per retiree, because that's the increase by changing the base.
Right.
That's $36,000 for 1 year.
Correct.
So times 10 years, that would be $360,000, or 3
Correct.
point.
But it's also looking beyond the 10 years because
Okay.
anyone who's retired now might be getting it for 20 years.
All right.
or 25 years.
So is the 4.1 over 10 years or over beyond 10 years?
So the 4.1 million is the liability for
Today.
making this change, or these two changes.
Okay, for the two
And
changes.
that's the added cost, not just the next 10 years, it's for as long as everyone who's working now gets that pension.
Okay. Councilor Zarella?
Thank you. After having just said I'm no good with the math, I did just want to ask if I'm getting this correctly, because I think there might have been one factor that got missed. If it's 36,000 this year, then over the next 10 years, it'll be an annual increase over that, right? Because we'll still be going up the potentially 3% or whatever. So it won't actually be 360,000. It'll be some compounding thing that I couldn't do without a calculator.
It'll be, we'd be paying out an additional 36,000 a year, but it's for the 600 retirees currently, plus the, I don't know what we have, 600 employees that we have in the system who are also going to be getting pensions and also going to be getting this additional $60 a year for all the time that they're working. So it isn't just what we're paying over the next 10 years, it's what we're going to be owing over the next 20 or 30 years to current employees.
Yeah, that's
So
what
we're
got lost.
funding the
is-
unfunded liability.
That's what got missed was the 4.1 million is not over 10 years. It's over the life of the estimation of the existing retirees makeup right now. What that would add 20 or 30 years down the road is the 4 million,
Right.
of which this tonight is the lion's share of that. The next meeting that we're discussing, the 5%, that's a smaller piece of that 4 million.
Correct.
Okay. So this is over multiple decades, as long as people are around. So, yeah.
Yep.
Motion to approve 27522.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 27522. Speaking on the motion, if I see no objection, I'll take this in unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. If there's no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you.